Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the next episode of NerdHype Reads, Shadowland number 2. And with this chapter, we're going to get into the central conflict of the miniseries. And I think you're going to find the gallery of characters involved in this one to be rather interesting choices. So, what are we waiting for? Let's jump right in. So the story opens up in Shadowland, at night of course, as we see someone thinking or speaking out loud to themselves, basically giving the reader a narrative of what's been going down in Shadowland. He comments about how Daredevil has managed to kick out the cops, enforce martial law, and rule the streets by force. As we see through the panels, this is a familiar looking NYC cabbie, who turns out to be Jake Lockley, a persona of Mark Spector, also known as Moon Knight. And of course, he seems to have bagged something up and swallows it for safekeeping, I hope. So we see here now that he decides to vandalize his own cab in an attempt to draw the attention of the hand ninjas patrolling through Shadowland. And when they show up, he makes a snarky remark about how they got there faster than any NYPD unit ever would, and tells them that they should get started while holding a bat menacingly. From here we transition to the soup kitchen we heard of in the last video, one where Danny Rand, the Iron Fist, volunteers at. Here we see that both him and Luke Cage are discussing what needs to be done about Daredevil and his rule over Shadowland, considering what he did to Bullseye in the last issue. Iron Fist brings up the claim that it was probably just self-defense, as Bullseye was the one to call out Daredevil at his own compound, but Luke has none of that, interjecting and calling it a cold-blooded murder. After Danny Rand continues to sort of stand up for Daredevil, saying that Bullseye pretty much had it coming due to his killing of so many people in the past, Luke once again comments that Daredevil's rule on the streets are just causing fear, and that fear will eventually make people turn on each other. As luck would have it, two homeless men start duking it out in the middle of the soup kitchen. When Luke steps in to break it up, the man attempts to stab him in the abdomen, but due to his unbreakable skin, snaps the blade in half. Right as this is happening, Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, steps in through the threshold of the door, claiming that those two men were just about to leave. And as such, they do. Luke Cage steps up to him, calling him out by the name of Kingpin. Fisk, of course, stops him by saying that he hates that name, and that he's just an honest businessman nowadays. To which Iron Fist replies with a funny little reference where he says, "Yeah, and I guess I'm Fin Fang Foom," as many of you may know as an old Iron Man villain. However, we see that Fisk is here to discuss with the two heroes about how Daredevil and his Shadowland activities are starting to become a problem. Cage rationalizes against Fisk that ninjas must be harder to buy off than cops, to which Fisk sort of just shrugs off. He goes on to say that the population of Hell's Kitchen and, by extension, Shadowland have been caged up and have begun to turn on one another. Therefore, the heroes must be prepared to do the unthinkable, which would be to take down the Daredevil. Now from here we transition to the Daredevil's Castle, where we see it's clearly a dark edifice that's only lit up by a few torches on the wall in the forms of dark dragons. As Matt sits on his dark throne, we see the Tarantula walking up to him, asking about his guilt over having to kill Bullseye, and that he shouldn't feel too guilty because it was probably necessary. However, at this point, Daredevil interjects, saying he doesn't feel guilty, and that he doesn't really feel anything whatsoever. That his main concern now is to recruit stronger fighters because his hand ninjas, as he refers to them, are just cannon fodder at this point. They're gonna need reinforcements. Tarantula, of course, rightfully questions this, asking Matt who he intends to fight, since Hammer is basically defunct after the events of Siege, and that Hell's Kitchen is locked down tighter than J. Jonah Jameson's retirement budget. Here, Daredevil explains that they need to expand their area of control, and that, eventually, the powers that be will basically attempt to resist it. He then tells Tarantula here to put out the word that he's inviting all costume heroes to join him under the authority of the Hand, and whoever doesn't accept and stands with them is basically against them, and will be treated as enemies. The story continues, transitioning over to Midtown in what seems to be Wilson Fisk's apartment, where we see him performing a ritual from an ancient scroll, while accompanied by Lady Bullseye. It seems here that the Kingpin is attempting to summon something called the Gaikotsu Warrior, which Lady Bullseye explains is one of the most ancient enemies of the Hand and to be feared. She questions how Fisk plans to use the Gaikotsu as a mere plaything, to which he responds that every man is forced to bend to his will, and that the entity he's summoning was a man at one point in time. Now, after chanting a few phrases in Japanese, depicted here as kanji, we see a powerful being seemingly crashing into Kingpin's apartment via the windows, causing both Fisk and Lady Bullseye to duck for cover. Now, we see here on this page a few clues as to who or what this entity might be. For one, Lady Bullseye first yells out to not look at the being's eyes. Clue number 1. We also see a dark boot step forward, awash in flames, number 2. During this reveal, Kingpin begins to speak out to the entity rather theatrically, to which the being doesn't really take lightly. Fisk states that there have been great injustices as of late, and that all over the cities, people are crying out for vengeance, which should be your last and final clue as to who it might be. Now from here we transition to the front of Daredevil Shadowland Complex, where it seems like White Tiger is turning away a small unit of street-level heroes in the form of Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Misty Knight, Shang-Chi, the Master of Kung Fu, and Colleen Wing, saying that this is no place for civilians and that Daredevil sees no one. Luke Cage simply replies to her by asking if they look anything like civilians to her. After they were finally allowed in, we see the group of heroes stand before Daredevil's throne, where he asked them if they reconsidered his offer to join the Hand's allegiance. The heroes state that they've only said that because that would be the only way that White Tiger would let them in, and that they're just here to discuss a few things with Matt. Daredevil, of course, turns them away, saying that there's nothing to discuss, to which Misty snaps out at him, saying that he's sitting there in his dark throne, abandoning his friends, and doing the kind of works he's doing is more than enough reason to have a discussion. Colleen, however, interrupts and steps in to speak in a gentler tone to Matt, telling them that they came to speak to him because they're worried about him due to the dead mobster bodies piling up on the outside. Daredevil, of course, utterly denies this, saying that his ninjas are on strict orders not to kill, to which Misty interjects to by bringing up the death of Bullseye at the hands of Matt himself. However, he replies by saying that Bullseye was like a mad dog that had to be put down, and that it was done for a greater good. Of course, this still doesn't sit well with the other heroes, as they ask what gives him the right to be the executioner when he used to be a good man as a lawyer who believed in justice. To which Matt responds that justice is what you make of it. Shang-Chi tells him that there is a right and a wrong, and that Daredevil must inherently know that what he's doing is wrong. Matt, however, lashes out at this, talking about how the Green Goblin was put in charge of national security and how Bullseye was accepted as an Avenger, and asks how after all this, if now he's the bad guy in this, to which Shang-Chi simply replies with a yes. Out of left field, we hear a voice call from the rooftop. Spider-Man has arrived to interject as well, saying that he knows on a personal level how the black costume thing never works out, while also making a joke about how simple it was to infiltrate the building for him. Many of you may know that Spider-Man had a black costume mark, which ended up being the black symbiote Venom. So that's his little quip about, the black costume not working out for him. Now from here we transition over to the Shadowland Dungeon, where we see prisoners talking to the now apprehended Jake Lockley, questioning his reason as to why he got himself beat up by hand ninjas and thrown in the dungeon, to which he simply replies that it was the easiest way for him to get in the place, considering all the crazy stuff and security he'd been hearing about the ninjas. So, he got himself caught because he had to find out for himself. It's revealed to us here that the prisoners alongside Lockley were actually NYPD SWAT that had been locked up for weeks alongside other criminals. Lockley responds to them by saying that he's gonna get them all out, eventually. But first, he needs to gather intel, and that he needs them to cover for him for a few seconds in order to get out. And here it's shown that he spits up the item that he swallowed up earlier during the book, revealing it to be a set of lockpicks. As he's breaking himself out, he assures the cops that he'll return to get them out. Before that, he has to get the lay of the land, or risk getting caught by the ninjas. But before we can finish telling them that they need to be quiet so he can escape, he's interrupted by a loud revving noise echoing through the halls of the dungeon. One of the cops says that the noise resembles the roar of a dinosaur, it's that loud, but Lockley knows exactly what it is. He simply replies by saying, "No, it's worse. It's an engine." And here we see the first full image of the Zugaikotsu, or more commonly known as the Ghost Rider, who comes to a brief halt at the edge of the halls before continuing his onslaught. As the hand ninjas come down to deal with the commotion, the Ghost Rider begins to dispatch them rather easily. However, the commotion has reached the ears of Daredevil and the Hand Ninja upstairs, saying that they are under attack. Daredevil immediately places the blame on the group of heroes in front of him, accusing them of distracting him so another party could wreak havoc down below while his attention was stuck on them. Even though Luke Cage vehemently denies any culpability in this, Matt still sticks Tarantula, White Tiger, and the rest of the Hand to attack the heroic squad in the room, ordering to take them either dead or alive. And with this, we're going to bring today's episode of NerdHype Reads to a close. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with the next installment of Shadowland. And remember guys, if you like what we do here at NerdHype, I'd love to have you subscribe to our channel. We do podcasts based on comics, TV, gaming, as well as in-depth comicisms videos and reads videos just like this one every week with some hero origin stories thrown in. So click here to subscribe and here to watch the previous NerdHype Reads video. This has been Danny Mac signing off, and remember, believe the hype. Later.